start of our mission here is to start early and late. And of course, on top of that, we have the fun construction that you probably all have the navigator too. So again, we do appreciate you being here today, and I'm assuming we're going to have more that will join us as we go along. So this time of year, the three of us, Ann, Stacy, and myself, are really coming off of one of the more hectic times of the school year in our cycle with admissions, and that's getting the senior applications out for early application. And this process has really evolved over, this is my 11th year here, and even over especially over the last 20 years, that the pressure on the students to get applications in earlier has increased every year. Now, where that pressure is coming from, that's a whole other topic, but they're feeling they have the ability, and so they're feeling the need to get their applications in as early as possible. So really, we feel like the bulk of our work, as far as getting recommendations and transcripts and everything out for the students, is pretty close to done by November 1, because most of our students are applying to at least one early application school. And so if we're going to get the information out for one, we're just going to get it out for everybody. Even if it's a regular decision school, we're still going to send all the documentation so it's sitting there waiting for the student to press send eventually for the regular decision application. So again, we've kind of just gotten through the most hectic time for us. So as we're trying to get our information out, we're also helping the kids with their essays and things like that for the early applications. And now what we really encourage the seniors to do is to keep that momentum going. They've been working so hard to get their early applications in, their essays and everything. Keep it up, get your January 1st ones done now as well. That's kind of the message. So, hopefully they took a little, a deep breath at the end of the goal, and now we're working hard at getting their regular decision applications going. Because what we would really like the students to be completely done working on applications by Thanksgiving. Really, wouldn't you guys agree with that?
December 1.
December 1. Okay, that's yeah. So we don't want this process for the students dragging into December, and we definitely don't want it dragging into winter break. And we want them to have that time to relax, spend time with family. Many of you will probably be traveling. You don't want them to have their laptop with them because they're trying to do 3 or 4 last-minute regular decision applications. Now, we tell them to do this every year, and they nod their heads at the time, and they say, yes, I agree with you, Mr. Greenwald. And then what do a handful of students end up doing in late December? Working on some last-minute applications. So, just to get a feel for the room, how many of you are senior parents? Okay. Junior parents? Okay. Sophomore? Freshman parents? Okay. So this is information to kind of bank in your head. You're going to hear these messages a lot as we go through the years, and as we have our parent appointments, college nights, and all these things. But this is where we're at with our seniors right now. So there's not a whole lot of other proactive things that we can do with our seniors at this point. We do a lot of follow-up with the colleges and the admissions representatives that are reading the students' applications. We help the students. For some schools, it's nice to send out an email to the representative. Other schools, it's not important at all for them to do that, so we help them figure out who should they be contacting. We help them write those emails to the representatives. But really, there's not a lot of other proactive things that we can be doing at this point. So now our focus starts to shift to the juniors at this point. And we have a junior college night coming up this Friday evening.
Thursday.
Did I say Friday? I meant Thursday. I just want it to be Friday. Thursday evening, thank you. Thursday evening in PAC. I say Friday. Anyways, so that's why Stacy's here to catch me.
No.
We'll go over the process from top to bottom at college night. We don't expect you to memorize or remember everything that we throw out to you. There's a reason why we're going to be meeting pretty consistently from here on out. You're going to be seeing a lot of emails and communications from us as reminders of these things. But we do want to give you a general sense of the broad scope of what this process looks like. After college night, the juniors will all receive an email from their counselor giving them their instructions to set up their first formal meeting with their college counselor. Now, we do that first meeting with the student and the counselor only. We want to have an opportunity to get to know them a little bit, and while this doesn't apply to all students, what we do see is sometimes a student sitting next to their parent is very different than a student sitting alone in a room with us, as far as how much they're willing to disclose about themselves, talk about their interests and things. So we want that opportunity to get to know them a little bit first, and then the next meeting, we bring everybody in together, okay? Because this is a team process. This is a family process. So the decisions happen on that side of the desk. You, your sons and daughters, you'll be making decisions. We'll be giving you information to hopefully empower you to make the best decisions possible for your sons and daughters, okay? So that's the way we kind of view things. So again, this is kind of a transition period for us, and we're excited because we get to start to know this amazing class that we've heard about so much with the juniors. With the coffees, we normally have a topic that we kind of bring to the table. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Common Application. So those of you who have not had a student go through this process before, you probably haven't seen much of the Common Application. You probably heard the name a whole bunch, but maybe you haven't seen it yet. So the handout that you're looking at, that you should have grabbed when you walked in, is like a preview copy of what the Common Application looks like. So you can get a sense of what types of questions they're going to be asking in the Common App. I'm going to walk through the electronic version, so it won't look exactly like what you're looking at. What you're looking at is what the student, when they click print, it changes its format and it looks this way, and this is how the colleges will see it. What you're going to see on the screen, hopefully, I know that's small, but again, that's why you can hand out too, is kind of the drop-down options and things that the students will have as they're filling it out. This is something that the students will be able to start working on late spring into summer. It used to be that on July 1st every year, they would wipe the Common App clean, and the students would have to start over if they had already started creating an account. That's no longer the case. They do roll over the information, so the students started to create an account earlier in the process. It would save their information, and they could still have that for the fall. So we'll talk to the juniors about that as we move forward. But I wanted you to have a sense of what types of questions the colleges are asking. Okay. So as we go along, if you have questions, just feel free to raise your hand. But I'll walk through a little bit about the content. Okay. So the first page, the screen that you see on the different monitors right now. This is the main hub for the students. So this is where the students are able to add the schools that they're applying to. And I would say 90+% of the schools that our students are applying to are on the Common Application. There are some schools that don't use the Common App right now. Most of them are large public universities that have their own system. They don't feel the need to ask a lot of fancy questions because they're a big university. They have a lot of seats available, so they just want to know transcript, test score, maybe a couple other demographic information about you, and that's it. For a lot of those big state universities, they don't need all that the Common App has to offer, so they just have their own application. So we'll have students that will apply to a few of those schools. There are a few private schools that still use their own. Georgetown infamously still uses their own application platform. And it can be a little frustrating when we're trying to send documents for them because we have to do things a little bit differently for Georgetown, but it's okay. We don't have that many Georgetown applications every year, but they still use their own system. I would say the biggest reason why Georgetown hasn't switched to the Common Application would be that they go kind of by the mantra, if it's not broke, don't fix it, and it's worked for them for a long time. They're not looking for an artificial boost in application numbers, which some admissions directors feel the pressure from the presidents or from the board, hey, we want applications up, that's on you guys. And so switching to Common App is the easiest way to get a quick bump to your application, because if, thousands and thousands of students around the country have already created one of these accounts, it's real easy just to add another school to put on this list. Boom, there's an extra application, and the VP enrollment gets erased the next year. Georgetown, their board, their president is saying, look, we just want you to enroll the best class possible. And so if the student's willing to navigate our cumbersome application system, that tells us that they kind of want to be here. And so, maybe in some ways Georgetown has it right, because again, they're not trying to artificially boost the numbers, they're just trying to get the best students for Georgetown, which is really what it should be all about. But thanks to things like U.S. News and World Reports and all of these things that put so much pressure on admissions offices, there's this gamesmanship that comes into play. So anyways, most of the schools that your sons and daughters will apply to will be on here. Even Michigan State this year has moved to the Common Application, which was that used to be our biggest holdout. The largest school amount of applications that we had to process for non-Common App used to be Michigan State, and now they're all in Common App too. So we're spending most of our time here with our students. So they're able to list their applications. This connects and works seamlessly with our Naviance system. I'm not going to talk a lot about Naviance today, but Naviance is how we send all of our documents, transcripts, recommendations. Your teachers are able to send their letters of recommendation all through Naviance. The Common App and Naviance sync together, so once a student adds a school here, it pops up on their Naviance account as well. So it works well. I'll click on one school so you can see what the different elements are. So the main Common Application, so there's a tab there, it also says it's incomplete there. The main Common Application is the part that's the same for every school that uses the Common Application. So the basic demographic information on the student, their educational history, their testing history, and then their main Common App essay. All the college and universities will see that main Common App essay. So that definitely can't be school specific. It needs to be a broad, general topic that students talk about there. So anything under the Common Application part on the website, that's something that every school the student applies to is going to see. All right, and we're going to walk through that in a second. The questions section will also walk through that as well. The questions is something that's unique for that specific school. So each school, college, or university can have their own questions that they want to ask that student. Maybe they want to know more information about how the student learned about that college or university. They want to know what method the student's going to apply to. Are they applying early action, early decision? Are they applying for the business school, the engineering school, or the liberal arts college? So how are they planning on applying? What term? Are they applying for the fall term? Yes, for our students, typically it's the fall term, but some schools offer the opportunity to apply for like winter terms and things like that. A student would always want to talk to their counselor before they selected something like that. Because sometimes I think the students think, I found the back door, this is how I'm going to get into this college supply winter term. That's oftentimes not the case. So they just need to talk to us if they think that's a move that they want to attempt. So the questions is going to be unique for that specific college or university. In this case, it's Duke. Recommenders and FERPA. So this is a section that we don't use a whole lot here. For high schools that don't have Naviance, which again makes it super simple for us and the teachers to send all the students' documents, they're making requests for recommendations through this tab. We make it real clear to the students early and often in their senior year not to use the recommendation requests here on the Common Application. Inevitably, there still will be some students that do it, no matter how many times we say it, and then the teachers will get a random email into their inbox and they come see us like, hey, Johnny just asked me to write a letter, but he already asked me to write a letter through Naviance, and we have to clean it all up. So we try to make that as clear as possible for the students. But what they do need to do in this section, the students have to fill out one time a waiver that one, gives us legal permission to send documents on the student's behalf. That's important. Otherwise, without their permission, we can't send transcripts, we can't send letters of recommendation, things like that. So the student needs to give us permission through that. And it's also where they waive their right to access to any of the letters of recommendation that are written to them. Now this, sometimes the first time they hear that, might make them a little anxious. They're like, why am I waiving my right to access? I want to see everything you send on my behalf. One, I tell them, our job is to get you into college. And your teachers would not agree to write that letter of recommendation for you if they didn't have positive things to say about you, because they're under no obligation to say yes. So what we try and how we try and comfort the students on that is saying, look, we're all going to write positive things, but the colleges want to know that there was no pressure on us with the student or the parents having seen what's in that letter of recommendation. They want to know that's authentic. And the best way for them to know it's authentic writing is by the student saying, you know what, I trust these people. I trust that they're going to represent me in the best way possible. And I hope over the past 3+ years, I've done enough to make sure that they write a positive letter of recommendation. We tell all of our teachers, tell a student no if you can't write a positive letter of recommendation. Okay? Our teachers do a great job. We have a chance to see the letters. They do an excellent job. Again, we want the students to get into the schools that they're applying to. But I think especially for a 17-year-old, they're thinking, oh my gosh, why am I giving up that control? But trust us, we make sure that the students are in good hands. But that's the only time they're going to be in that section. And then finally, down here you can see, on top of the additional questions they have additional essays that they want the student to write. So not only do they have to answer some specific questions that the school's asking, but they say, we want to see a little bit more writing. We want you in 250 words to talk about why you want to be an engineer. We want to see in 150 words you elaborating on one of your activities and why it was the most important thing that you did in high school. So they all can have their own unique question sets. Now, as the student starts to look at all the different schools that they're applying to, what they will see are there similar patterns to the additional essays that the schools might and prompts that they offer. So it's not always recreating the wheel. Sometimes they'll say, okay, it looks like I have 20 additional essays to write, but really these two are similar, these two are similar. And so, yeah, you might have to tweak them a little bit, college for college. Some might need to be a little bit longer, some shorter. But it's not quite as much work as sometimes I think the students think it is, as far as starting over. Now, as far as the amount of work it should be for them, they need to make sure they're putting in the time. They need to make sure that they're not waiting to the week before the deadline to have these submitted. A lot of our top students pride themselves in their ability the night before, 2 nights before, to write an immaculate research paper and still get an A, in Mr. Kenny's class or something like that. And that's something that they take great pride in. And it is good to be able to work under pressure. This is not an area to test that. They want to make sure that they're putting in the time well ahead with these essays. I can't tell you how many last-minute revisions and edits that students were asking all 3 of us, actually 4 of us, because they were asking Cheryl as well. Hey, could you please look at this for me? Well, when is this due? Tomorrow. That's, one, they shouldn't have been waiting that long, but 2, now we got to do it as quickly as possible, make those revisions, get it back to them, and then bring it back to it was kind of a crazy year that way. So we're really, as much as we say it, get on these essays, get them done early. Fall happens, and we warn the seniors. You have homecoming, you have fall sports, you have a tough senior schedule. The way the goal ended this year was the same week as the application deadline. So there were a lot of tests that week. So some students really put them in some precarious spots. And they had to really work to get themselves out of it. So we saw a lot of stressful faces that week. We don't want to see that many stressful faces again at that time next year. We felt like we said it 100 times, we're going to say 101 times next year to make sure these students are staying on top of their deadlines. But this is where the additional writing comes. Because in their English class this year in the spring, they're going to do their main Common App essay. They're going to do a practice draft on that. But sometimes the students forget about how much other writing there still is out there. So that's, again, why they need to be working on this in the summer and early spring rather than waiting as late as the deadline. Okay? So let's get into the application itself. And so the paper that you have in front of you, the handout in front of you, it won't look quite the same as this, but it's the same information, okay? So you can see at the very beginning, it's basic demographic information. It's pretty obvious why they're asking that, so I'm not going to go into that. But the next page is going to ask about family. And I think students, one, your sons and daughters will need you for this section. You know, they're going to want to be independent. They're going to want to say, Mom, I got this, don't worry about it. They're going to need you for this section because they probably don't know, or they may not know exactly which college or university you applied to. As many times you've talked about it, you know, okay, it's in one, out the other. It's going to ask what year you graduated. They might not know that. So it's going to ask a lot of information that the students might not have available to them right away, or they may not remember. So this section is important for you to have your eyes go over it before they press submit. Okay. Now, why do colleges ask this information? Context, context, context. I'm going to talk a lot about that today. They want to know a little bit about the student's background. They want to know a little bit about their home life. They want to know what type of support that student has had throughout their education, or have they had any support at all? And so, they're looking for, how many advanced degrees does the student's parents have? Did they both go to college? Did they go to college at all? Did they graduate from high school at all? They want to know this information. And so we want to make sure it's accurate. Now, the follow-up oftentimes by students is, well, does it hurt me that my parents are doctors or something like that? The answer is no. I mean, there's nothing. The college is going to know that you're very likely going to be well prepared to come onto their campus. You've been in a household that likely highly values education. You should know how to study and if you have questions, you can talk to your parents about, hey, when you were in college, what office did you go to get this question answered, and so on. So they're going to know a little bit about that student's level of preparation. A student who maybe both parents just have a high school education, they're going to look at that student and say, you know what, we maybe need to give the student some additional resources when they get here. Maybe a lot of schools have programs for first-generation college students where they can, at least in that first semester, if not the entire first year, they have mandatory regular check-ins with an advisor, a person, not just their academic advisor, but someone who can help them navigate college, right? So that's part of the reason why they're asking that information. They're trying to get a sense of what does this student's world look like, and it starts with the family. It starts at home, right? Okay. The next thing they're going to ask is about the student's education. So, and I guess about the parents. The last thing, alumni relations, alumni connections. That's another thing that they're looking for, whether it's through the parents or through siblings. Now, oftentimes parents will ask, well, we had an uncle that attended, we have a grandparent that attended. If the school is interested in that, they will ask for more information in their individual question section. But the main Common App essay doesn't talk about that, or Common App section doesn't talk about it. It's just basically looking at parents, siblings, that's it. Grandparents, uncles, things like that could potentially be asked in the individual school's questions. Okay. Now we'll talk about education. So, for many of our students, this is pretty straightforward. However, we have a handful of students every year that are transferring into Country Day at some point during their high school career. Now, if a student came in 7th grade, Country Day is the only school they're ever going to see here. What they care about here is grade 9 through 12. Okay? But some students will transfer in and maybe have attended multiple schools. That's going to be listed here, so the college will be able to see which high schools the student attended, and therefore with how many transcripts, how many different high school transcripts should they expect to receive in their records office for it to be sent to them. But basic information, date of entry is something we catch students on every year, because oftentimes when they're thinking date of entry, they're thinking, well, I've been here since pre-K3, so that's the date I'm going to put in there, but then it looks like it took them, 16 years to get through high school. What they're asking for it again is grade 9 through 12. That's what they care about. As a boarding school, when you graduate from the school, yada, yada. The counselor information, again, this is important. We'll make sure the students have our phone number, off the top of their head when they're sitting at home. They probably don't know our phone number, things like that. We give them a handout. It also will be in the senior handbook that you'll receive at senior college night. All this information. And it's important that this information is accurate, because we get, surprisingly or maybe not surprisingly, we get a lot of phone calls from the colleges, and this is where they're typically grabbing that information from. And because they don't want to just call a country day and say, hey, who's working with this kid? They want to know which
Amy, please Schilling, please come to the academic office. Amy, please Schilling, please come to the academic office.
So we'll make sure they have that information. Again, here's where the other schools would go. Colleges, universities. This is an important section for us to point out to the students as well. Many of the students will take summer programs at a college campus, and sometimes the program was advertised as receive college credit. Northwestern is probably one of the biggest programs that we see our students go through year in, year out that offers those types of things. Even if your son or daughter does one of those programs, make sure they say no there. It's not wrong if they say yes. The issue is a lot of these college universities, their systems, when something is populated here, it's automatically triggered and it goes under review that the student might initially be considered a transfer student because they have some college work. We just tell students, yeah, we're going to make sure you get credit for that one class you took over the summer, but we're going to send that later. We're going to get that information to them in a different manner, because this could put a little bit of a delay on your application. And even though it would, at the end of the day, it probably wouldn't hurt you, why go through that? So we just instruct the students, no matter what, just say no in that section. They're also going to ask for their grades, so we'll make sure the student knows what their class size is. We do not rank here, so very easy to answer, no rank there. We'll make sure the students also are aware of what their grade point average is coming out of their junior year, and that's what goes on this screen here. We're a 4-point scale, and we're unweighted. Okay, so the colleges will have much more context with that when they look at our profile, they look at the student's transcript, but they do want to know that basic information right up front here. It'll ask for their senior schedule. This is frustrating for some of our students because they're like, well, they know it's on the transcript and they have to write these really long titles to the school, to the classes and so on. But the reason that the colleges ask for this is that some high school transcripts don't put the senior schedule on there. And so this is really helpful for the colleges when they're trying to assess how much is the student choosing to challenge himself in their senior year. Now, if you think about it, some of our students are going to be pushing send on this application the second week of September. If they're really on top of things, they're getting this out second week of September. They're reporting their senior schedule here. Many of our students as well are changing their schedules like crazy for that entire first month of September. It can be a little frustrating how many changes some of our students make, but it happens. We understand that there could be legitimate reasons for that, more than just I want to be in the same class as Johnny. So that's the one little thing that students have to be careful of is the schedule that they start the year with. If they have doubts, if they're thinking, you know what, I don't think I'm going to make it through this class, but I'm going to try it out for a little bit, it might be better if they're really truly thinking, I don't think, if they have doubts about that class, maybe make that move right away and get them out of that class, because they're going to be reporting their schedule very early on, and if the transcript that we send a week or two later is different than what's here, just draws the wrong kind of attention to their application. Now, every time a student makes a schedule change, we help the student write an email to the college to explain, I made a change, here's why. Again, that's not normally the kind of things you want to be sharing with the school. So it's really important that when your sons and daughters receive that senior schedule in late summer, that you really talk about, is this the schedule we feel we're going to move forward with? Or if you're in a class where you think, we were just going to take a shot, see how this goes, knowing we can always drop down, that's not a great philosophy heading into the senior year because of things like this, okay? So that's a good conversation to have with the student's advisor and also with their college counselor. If you're sitting kind of on the edge or on the cusp with one of these classes, okay? Because they are going to expedite it. Honors. A lot of our students will say, well, what kind of academic? They can think of honors based on clubs or organizations and sports they're involved with, but academic ones for a lot of our students don't come to mind right away. The simplest form is our academic honors through like summa, magna, or cum laude, based on their grades. And that should be on the report card every year if they receive those honors. So those are the kind of things that can go into. If a student is a National Merit Semifinalist, if a student won science fair, these are academic related activities. These are academic honors that they're asking for here. So those things would be appropriate to put in there. National math exam, national language exams, all those kind of things could also fall under this category as well. So a lot of times the students will sit on our desk and they'll say, Mr. Greenwald, I don't know what to put in this category, or I don't think I have anything. And normally if I pick their brain a little bit, all of a sudden now we have 2 or 3 things listed here. But it's not intuitive for them to think of that, so it's normal. That's why it's important for them to have us kind of go over their application with them before they press send. Community-based organizations, I have never had a student that has worked with one of those through here, so that typically they should say no there. That's typically for like at-risk students at schools that don't offer college counseling at all. And then their future plans. They ask potential career interest, highest degree you intend to earn. Students put a lot of pressure on themselves with this question, but really it's best guess. Nobody's going to come back to them 4 years from then and say, hey, you never followed through on this. It's just the school wants to get a sense of what are you thinking about at this time. Now that should complement any essays, any questions that fall under this college-specific question. So if for the University of Michigan, you say you want to be an engineer, but then you did talk about engineering here, I mean, that might cause them to scratch their head for a second. So we want some continuity throughout the application. But saying you're undecided, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And actually, I think a lot of colleges appreciate that honesty because instead of seeing the go-to, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to say business or pre-med or something like that, you might be thinking that and considering those and weighing those options, but if the student truly doesn't know, they can go ahead and put undecided there, and that's fine. What those colleges will see with that student is this is someone who's going to come into our campus with an open mind. They're not going to have those blinders on and ignore some opportunities that could have been like the best fit for that student. So colleges actually appreciate when students come into it with that mentality. Okay, so that's the education section. Question on that?
I
Yes.
just have one quick question. Do you typically put only one in there? Does that make sense? Like in terms of career interests, check either one box or undecided?
The question was, does the student normally just select one? Yeah, you're only able to put one in here, and once you load this, since this is the main Common App part, once you load it once, every school's going to see that, so you can't necessarily tailor it school by school. Good question. Okay. The next section they ask for is testing. Now this section has changed a little bit. At least the importance of this section has changed over the past year. For a long time, our students wondered why they had to fill this section out because they had to send their formal test scores via either the ACT or the College Board anyway, so why do I have to self-report this? And in some ways, I kind of understood why they would question that. Because again, each college university needed the student to send those documents in order for them to consider it complete. Well, that all changed this year. A number of schools went to self-reported test scores, meaning that in order to be considered for admission, they will trust what the student puts on here. Once the student's admitted, the student then has to send one test report that will validate what they put on here. And if there's discrepancies, they lose that admission. So it's important that this is accurate. There's no incentive to lie here because it's, you're not going to be able to maintain that admission if you can't provide the test scores to back that up. But what this is doing is it's helping to move the process forward quicker. Sending test scores can take 2 or 3 weeks once you make that request. And so that normally the number one thing that's holding a student's application up from being reviewed is test scores. And that's just because the testing agencies, it's not an immediate press send and now it's in the admissions office right away. It takes some time. So now they can move forward right away with whatever the student has self-reported. And instead of spending $12 per test score that they're sending out, so that can add up. I was sitting in my office this fall. The students are sitting there with your credit cards, and they're spending $100 here, $200 here, $300 here, sending out test scores. They're applying to 8, 9, 10 schools. It adds up really fast. What this does is it helps students to really only have to send test scores one time. The difficulty with this self-reported test score is that it's not consistent across the board yet. So maybe about half the schools our students apply to, the scores are self-reported. The other half, they're still relying on the student to send it out, to have it sent in that traditional manner. So we do our best to help our students navigate that. The one takeaway I want you to have out of it is don't put that part off. So in September, your sons or daughters should have had the conversation with their counselor about which schools do I need to have my tests sent to, which ones can I wait, and they should do it before we get into mid to late October, because it can take 2 to 3 weeks to get there. Okay, so that's the big takeaway I want you to have. Make sure they're talking to their counselor about that early in the process. Okay, because this time next year there could be a whole new group of schools that are accepting it this way. We have to wait and see. Those are the frustrations and nuances of this process that I guess are job security for me, because this process is constantly changing. It's frustrating. Sometimes there's not a lot of logic behind it, but again, we'll stay on top of those things for you, and we'll make sure you have the right answers to that. Okay? Yes. Yeah.
So here it's showing where it's asking all the different tests and the different scores.
Right.
And then it's asking for the date as well. So are some of these for super score schools as well?
Yeah, so again, this is another one of those things that comes down to, it depends on the school you're applying to, whether they will super score or not. Some schools will also say, even though we don't super score, we want to see every test your son or daughter has taken. Now, I know some parents of sophomores that rose their hands today.